All right, folks, welcome back from the commercial break. Always excited to have this next guest on. He's on the front lines of creating transparency from a federal government that often is allergic to transparency. He is none other than the president of Judicial Watch and our good friend, Tom Fitton. Tom, great to have you on the show today.
Hey, good to be with you again, John. Thank you for the good word.
It's amazing how many times things you did in the past come back up and they're relevant to the current debate. And I want to have a little fun today because there is a direct dotted line between Bill Clinton's sock drawer and the raid on Melania's closet at Mar-a-Lago. And I want to walk through that today. It's an amazing thing that your team did. But walk us through the importance of the case where you found the audio tapes that Bill Clinton had kept in his sock drawer of his conversations as president with a historian. An amazing case.
Yeah, I don't even remember how we found out about it. Maybe there was a news story about it. And there was Taylor Branch had done a book on Clinton, you may recall. And he recorded some of his conversations with him for the book. And Clinton kept copies of, I think it was more than one tape. But the tapes included at least his half of the conversation with foreign leaders, members of Congress, and other government officials. So we saw that and we said, hey, what about the Presidential Records Act? Aren't these in the library? Because we had been litigating against the library for probably 15 years at that point.
Right.
And so we sued the archives and they came back to us and they told us, go pound sand. And we're in court before one of the most of the left-wing judges on the bench, Beryl Howell. She's an expert, though, in FOIA matters and open records matters. The government, the lawyer for the archives, said, you know what? If the documents are in the former president's hands, they're presumptively personal. We just, we presume they're personal. And sure enough, the court found later in an opinion that the archives couldn't get behind the decision by a president to term documents either personal or presidential. So, that's the position. That's not only the legal position of the Justice Department, but it's the law.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's bolstered by the Constitution, which gives ultimate classification authority by virtue of his role as commander in chief to the president. So essentially, anything he took with him out of the White House, the Justice Department previously had told us in response to a question about Bill Clinton, tough luck, it's his. But they changed their mind for Donald Trump. And I want to know, did they tell the court that?
That's a great question.
Did they tell the court our policy and the law and a court decision suggests that Trump is right? And frankly, based on this analysis, Trump should get every single document they took from him back.
Yeah,
because they're all personal records.
Thanks to you, I've been able to read through the transcripts and the final court ruling by the judge. And, it's pretty clear the court and the Justice Department are of the same mind, which is the president's authority to decide what's a personal government record is absolute, just like the president's ability to classify a document is absolute. So that's going to be the history on which, when this gets into the courts, it's going to turn on. The history is clearly, and legal precedent clearly in favor of the president. The Justice Department had to know at some point someone was going to dig this stuff up. Why do they take the risk of the raid? Have you developed a theory why they do this? And is it really about the records at all?
That's a good question. You kind of raised an interesting issue because, I started raising this issue online.
You did.
Back in February or January when this news first came up that there was this dispute, and the media took note of it. And the experts who are basically former government experts were trying to shoot it down. Even I was right, but they were trying to shoot it down in their fact checks. So you can be sure they knew this issue was out there, and this wasn't, quote, a forgotten case.
Right.
So and then it leads to the other question is, what were they really doing here? And what, if the goal is to harass the president and to try to jail him on whatever might possibly stick, this is probably something that they saw, hey, this is something we can go in on. And they let their hatred for Trump overcome their legal acumen and analysis to the degree it exists. People have to remember that the agencies, Justice Department, the leadership of the FBI, is left to center, liberal, and certainly in the case of the Justice Department, almost universally Democrat. And I'm not just talking about the appointees of Biden.
Right.
I'm talking about the other lawyers, and it goes for other federal agencies as well. So they're partisan ideologues, and they hate Trump, and that's what's going on here.
Yeah, such an important thing to remind people of that. That is the dynamic. I had a chance to interview you the other day. You were the first person to call a lot of over collection in this search rate. Just when you look at the thing, and a few hours after that, well, what do you know? The FBI said, "Oh, we over collected. We collected passport, privileged materials. We're working on a process to get it back to you." This is like the most historic raid that any FBI agent could possibly participate in. They know they're creating history by raiding the home of a former president, and yet they don't get the basics right. They over-collect. What does that say about the skill set of the FBI today?
Well, I saw your headline there, over collect, and I thought, John, you are being so charitable.
Yes, I probably was.
I mean, they went in there with a vacuum cleaner. They didn't care.
That's right.
You don't take passports without pause.
That's right.
It's not the sort of thing that, oh, well, I don't know what that is. Just throw it in there. And it highlights, the lack of good faith by the operators who went in there, and B, the broad nature of the warrant. I thought, one of the, the media just pretends, pretends that we're stupid and, we're supposed to ignore our plain eyes. And Garland told us, typically, we don't do raids. So this was atypical.
Yeah.
And typically, we have narrow search requests. So what's the mirror of that? A broad one. So they went in under Garland's own on Garland's own admission on a fishing expedition, and the proof is in the pudding. They came up with his passports. And I was thinking about this today, John, and I don't know if your reporting has borne this out yet. This must be a national security issue, not in the sense they think it is, but in the sense America is being destabilized by this administration. And I would think our friends and our enemies are looking at us thinking, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Is the government stable? Because we're used to this, but America ain't. And it's very concerning. And I hope people don't draw. I hope our enemies don't draw the wrong conclusions, and certainly I hope our friends don't draw the wrong conclusions. Because if they think we're not stable and we're weak, who knows what will happen.
Yeah, and also, they've always looked to us to the example of freedom, and this looks like anything but freedom anymore. It looks like banana republic politics, and that's got to be unsettling to people who still believe in democracy and constitutional republics around the world. Last question. You've done some amazing work on Dr. Anthony Fauci and getting us documents he's never wanted to turn over to the American public. Like 3-4 days ago, the CDC basically just said, we got everything wrong. Of course, they didn't say that, but they basically put out all new rules that reversed everything that they had been telling us for 2.5 years. You look at this and you see the crushing of dissent. Any doctor that challenged their position 2 years ago was called a quackpot, a risk to medical health. Now you're seeing people like the Homeland Security Department, the FBI, and Garland saying anyone that has a question about an open border or the raid on Donald Trump, they pose a domestic terrorism threat. This is a moment where dissent is being crushed in the name of security and health, and it's not even true. The end result is they crush something with a lie. When do we start to begin to unravel this dynamic with the government? What's the solution for this?
Well, we had part of the solution at the end of the Trump administration where he and his people said, look, that we have these, and the left distorts this. We've got these bureaucrats who are exercising extraordinary power, and they're not accountable in the traditional sense to the president. So if they're making policy decisions that really a political appointee ought to be making, we're going to make their position subject to immediate removal by the president or their. And so in my view is expanding the number of political appointees while curtailing the power of government. We can talk about Fauci, for some length, but certainly the goal of any good conservative Congress or a good conservative president would be to make sure there is never again another Fauci, someone who's been able to accumulate so much power within an agency that essentially he's warping the whole public health establishment, not only here in the United States but abroad. Fauci has way too much power, given his lack of accountability within our system. And I don't mean he's unaccountable and that he can't be fired. It means he's acting like a political appointee when in fact he's a civil servant. We can't have that anymore.
Yeah, that's it. They're making policy. They're not carrying out policy. They've actually become the policy makers. Tom, it is always an honor to have you on. It's so amazing to watch the work of Judicial Watch. I can't wait to see your next big lawsuit or your next big document dump, because America is going to be a lot better for it. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome, John.
All right, folks, we'll take a quick commercial break. We'll be back to wrap things up right after this.